Welcome back to The Bible's Art, and in this video, I want to talk about how Tolkien refutes source criticism. So we started listening to The Lord of the Rings with our family, and we were listening to the prologue and of the Fellowship of the Ring, and what's fascinating is that Tolkien goes out of his way to say that, hey, I know that this was written during World War II, but this has nothing to do with World War II. And at first glance, you might say, what's interesting about that? He's just saying, like, this is not about World War II. Now, yes, that is just that. But if you apply that insight, that is to say that the book that he is writing doesn't have anything to do with the main thing that's going on in the world. And then you think about source criticism. Now, what is source criticism? Well, it's a means of interpretation. It's a tool in reading the Bible, and typically practiced by more liberal, mainline scholars. And what it does is sees a part of its task is to read these texts and to get at the sources behind them, step one. So what were the sources these authors were working with? And then understand the Sitz im Leben, the setting in life. Like, what was the situation in history that produced these texts? So, the most common one is like JEDP in the Pentateuch, in the first 5 books of the Bible, and said, hey, there are these 4 sources behind them. And we know that they're here, and we can trace back to their origins and understand kind of why they were produced, because if we understand who these people were and what was going on at the time, then we can infer about why they produced this material. Now, of course, biblical authors use sources. Luke will tell us that. The Book of Kings will talk about sources it used. But typically, most of the time, source criticism is not talking about the sources that we know about, that are referenced, that we have hard data for. It's inferred sources, right? It's the sort of a main problem is that anytime there's a sort of difference of identification. So it could be difference in language, difference in grammar, difference in themes. They say, oh, well, this is another source, right? And so it identifies difference with authorship, right? Or different source, which already is extremely problematic. But here's the point of the insight of Tolkien into this, because what Tolkien is saying is, I understand that there may, because what's behind, he wouldn't have said that, don't associate this with World War II, unless there were connections that could easily be made. And you can understand that, with good and evil and this battle and all these things where it's like, oh yeah, they're connections that you could see there. And he's saying, but don't make that connection. And so if we think about it source criticism, where we say we look back and we can understand who these people are, and oh, this is why they wrote. And whereas you have another author up here in the modern period that we know about, and he's like, hey, I know you might think that, but that's not why I wrote. And so why can't we apply that same logic there back then? But there's an even deeper insight. And this is one of the things, the most profound and also most problematic with how literature is taught and read today. And that is that one of the fundamental features of humans, of humane beings made in the image of God, is the ability to transcend the current moment. So your soul, your mind, your imagination, rationality, so whatever you want to call this, that God has given us this ability to rise above the vicissitudes, the sort of animalistic causal sequence that the animal kingdom exists in, right? And we have this ability of imagination and memory to rise above this sort of creational sphere and to guide our attention and imagine different worlds and different places. But when works of art, when works of craft, when we presuppose that we know what it's about, and this happens today with feminist readings and sort of neo-Marxist readings of things, well, we have to find these power struggles. We have to be what I like to call transgression treasure hunters. So we go into literature and we see, okay, who's the class in power and who are the oppressed and what do they think about this, right? And we're looking for these structures. And what is lost in all of this is the work itself, right? The particularity of the view, because one of the characteristic features of great and long-lasting literature is its ability to rise above, to do that humane step that rises above the moment and does a work of genius and imagination that is able to like you're standing up and you're peering above, you're in a field of sunflowers, and all of a sudden you can see, and there's a mountain over there, and there's a lake over there, and I want to talk about that over there, and this over there, and I want to bring these together in these ways, and you have this imaginative world that's constructed, which of course bears some relation to the time that it was in, but its great humane ability is to step out of its own world into another world. Our ability to move back and get behind the text. You know, C.S. Lewis had this great phrase that people are so good at reading between the lines that they can't read the lines themselves, right? The object, the structure and the nature of the object is lost. And of course that'll affect, because literature is about humans, that'll atrophy our ability to read people, because we will assume we know what the other person is always about, and we won't let the person be the type of thing that it particularly is. And so I found that to be a fascinating insight into Tolkien that we should use when applying to other literary forms. Thank you so much for checking out the video this week. I really do appreciate it. Let me know your thoughts below. If you'd like to support the channel, you can do so at patreon.com/thebiblesart, or get notified when there's a new video at biblesart.com/newsletter, and I'll see you later.